Als Boukema 13 war, hatte er 90 Teddybären. Einen für jedes Mal, dass er über Nacht in einem Krankenhaus bleiben musste. Seit der Geburt hatte er nämlich das, was man einen Wasserkopf nennt. Bei Menschen mit dieser Krankheit sind die Räume im Gehirn erweitert und mit Hirnwasser gefüllt. Der kleine Thies konnte deshalb oft schlecht sehen, fühlte sich jeden Tag wie betrunken und hatte oft furchtbar Kopfschmerzen. Und er war überzeugt, ich werde früh sterben. Warum das wichtig ist? Boukema hatte Glück im Unglück. Er ist in den Niederlanden aufgewachsen und konnte mit 20 Jahren ein Praktikum in New York machen. Dort hatte er im Büro einen schweren Anfall und so ist er das allererste Mal in einem US-Krankenhaus gelandet und an einen Arzt geraten, der ihm eine ganz andere Diagnose gestellt hat als die Ärzte in Europa. Er war sicher, dass eine Operation helfen könnte. Dieser Arzt hat das Leben von Boukema verändert und bei ihm auch das Interesse an der Analyse von Daten geweckt. Heute ist Boukema Leiter für Daten, Technologie und künstliche Intelligenz bei dem Londoner Wagniskapitalgeber Dawn Capital. Und er trägt mit seiner Arbeit dazu bei, dass die Investmentfirma oft einen guten Zugang zu Gründerinnen und Gründern mit besonders aussichtsreichen Startups bekommt. Er hat nämlich eine Technologie entwickelt, mit der Dawn die persönlichen Kontakte aller Mitarbeiterinnen und Mitarbeiter für die Firma nutzbar machen und das Netzwerk der Firma strategisch erweitern kann. Wie diese Software genau funktioniert, was andere Unternehmen sich davon abgucken können und wie es ihm gelungen ist, unter den schwierigen Umständen eine so beeindruckende Karriere zu starten, darüber spreche ich mit Boukema in diesem Podcast. Und damit herzlich willkommen bei Handelsblatt Disrupt. Ich bin Larissa Holzki und ich freue mich, dass Sie zuhören. Bevor wir zu Boukema kommen, will ich diese Woche aber noch über eine Nachricht sprechen, die wirklich die ganze KI-Szene bewegt hat. Es geht um die Mega-Finanzierungsrunde des französischen KI-Forschers Yann LeCun. Mehr als $1 Milliarde, das sind 890 Millionen Euro, hat er für seine neue Firma Labs eingesammelt. Das ist die größte Anschubfinanzierung für ein Startup, die es in Europa je gegeben hat. Und was dahinter steckt, das weiß meine Kollegin Lina Knees, die mit Yann LeCun selbst darüber sprechen konnte. Jetzt ist sie hier bei mir im Studio. Hallo Lina, schön, dass du da bist. Hi. Lina, für alle, die den Namen Yann LeCun noch nie gehört haben, wer ist das und warum hat er für seine erst ein paar Wochen alte Firma so viel Geld einsammeln können?
Ja, Yann LeCun ist ein französischer KI-Forscher, der wird oft als Vater der KI bezeichnet. Und zwar, weil er einen großen Durchbruch erreicht hat im Bereich der Computer Vision, also des Sehens mit KI, sage ich jetzt mal, des digitalen Sehens. Er hat damals Convolutional Neural Networks zum Laufen gebracht. Das war so eine neue Technologie damals, die es ermöglicht hat, handgeschriebene Schrift digital auszulesen. Das heißt, seine Erfindung hat es ermöglicht, dass man handgeschriebene Schecks schon in den 90er Jahren digital auslesen konnte. Für seine Arbeit bei den Convolutional Neural Networks hat er 2018 auch den Turing Award bekommen.
Das ist sowas wie der Nobelpreis für KI?
Ganz genau, das ist so die höchste Auszeichnung, die man bekommen kann, wenn man Informatiker ist. Und das macht ihn halt auch so bekannt und deswegen gucken auch alle, was macht Yann LeCun als nächstes und wo setzt er quasi seine Forschungsressourcen ein. Und ich glaube, das ist auch der Grund, warum er so viel Geld einsammeln konnte.
Ja, und in der jüngeren KI-Szene würde ich mal sagen, auch außerhalb der Forschung ist er ja vor allem bekannt, weil er zuletzt KI-Chefwissenschaftler bei Meta, also bei dem Konzern hinter Facebook war. Und weil er in der Rolle in den letzten Monaten und inzwischen auch Jahren andere KI-Gurus viel und lautstark kritisiert hat, zum Beispiel über die Plattform X. Was hat er denn im Hype um KI zu kritisieren und warum ging es für ihn bei Meta nicht weiter?
Ja, LeCuns Meinung ist immer so ein bisschen konträr gegangen zu der von Mark Zuckerberg bei Meta. Also Yann LeCun sagt, dass Sprachmodelle, das sind die großen KI-Modelle, die hinter sowas wie ChatGPT, den Chatbots stecken. Er sagt, dass die zwar total toll sind und viele Sachen machen können, aber sie sind eben nicht das, was einen zu menschlicher Intelligenz führt oder zu menschenähnlicher Intelligenz, die man mit KI versucht nachzubilden. Seine Meinung ist da so, ja, Sprachmodelle, wie der Name schon sagt, wurden auf Sprache trainiert und das hat mit unserer realen Welt erstmal wenig zu tun, weil wir bewegen uns ja quasi durch eine Umgebung und nehmen Sachen wahr. Das machen Sprachmodelle zum Beispiel nicht. Und diese Meinung war jetzt nicht unbedingt so beliebt bei Meta, hat er uns verraten, weil die haben ganz schön viel Geld da reingesteckt, diese Sprachmodelle immer größer zu machen und immer weiter zu trainieren. Und er wurde ja auch nicht müde zu kritisieren, dass das vielleicht nicht der richtige Weg ist. Er hat aber auch betont, es gab jetzt keinen großen Streit, weswegen er gegangen ist, sondern einfach nur, er hat für sich gemerkt, okay, die Ausrichtung in diesem Unternehmen ist nicht das, was ich mir vorstelle. Deswegen muss ich wohl meinen eigenen Weg gehen.
Und offensichtlich kriegt er ja auch außerhalb die Unterstützung und das Kapital, um seine Ideen umzusetzen. Jetzt mit Labs, das steht für Advanced Machine Intelligence. Was genau hat er denn vor? Hat er euch dazu schon was verraten?
Ja, ein bisschen was hat er uns schon verraten. Also mit Army Labs will er ein anderes Modell als Sprachmodelle bauen. Und zwar eben genau diese, wie ich jetzt auch schon erwähnt habe, die die Umwelt verstehen können, die sich halt in unserer Welt auch bewegen können, Sachen wahrnehmen, handeln können, vorausplanen können. Er meinte, das kann KI noch nicht so gut. Dafür braucht es sogenannte Weltmodelle. Das ist jetzt ein neues Hypewort in der KI-Szene, würde ich sagen. Für Jan Le Car ist das die nächste Revolution in der KI. Also ein Modell, das die Umgebung wahrnimmt und sagen kann, okay, ich möchte jetzt zum Beispiel eine Kiste vollpacken. Welche Schritte muss ich dafür tun? Und dieses Modell stellt sich dann vor, wie gewisse Handlungsschritte sich auf die Umgebung auswirken würde und ja, wählt die beste Option, um diese Kiste zu packen. Also zum Beispiel Arm heben, Arm dahin bewegen und baut sich so dann, ja, sag ich mal, Bewegungsmuster zusammen, um ein Ziel zu erreichen.
Und weiß man, wie nah er an der Umsetzung schon dran ist? Gibt es schon erste Konzepte, Pläne?
Also er hat dabei, an solchen Modellen hat er halt schon bei Meta geforscht und da gab es schon erste Erfolge. Das Modell hieß Jepa, aber er hat uns erzählt, intern wurde es schon immer Ami genannt. Das heißt, er hat eigentlich nur den internen Namen jetzt nach außen getragen. Diese Modelle wurden schon in diese Hundroboter von Boston Dynamics eingesetzt und ausprobiert. Das sind natürlich erstmal Demo-Versionen. Wir können gespannt sein, was als nächstes passiert.
Ja, das sind wir auf jeden Fall. Also sehr gespannt, was da passiert. Und was man noch sagen kann, es gibt Gerüchte, dass in London schon der nächste Ex-Forscher eines großen Tech-Konzerns, in diesem Fall von Google, an einer Milliardenfinanzierungsrunde für ein ganz neues Startup arbeitet, das einen neuen KI-Ansatz verfolgt. Es passiert also was in Europa. Wir verfolgen das gespannt. Danke, dass du da warst, Gina.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Und wenn Sie auch künftig jederzeit wissen wollen, was und wer die KI-Szene und die Wirtschaft bewegt, dann empfehle ich Ihnen als Ergänzung zu diesem Podcast auch das Handelsblatt-Abo. Ob Märkte, Unternehmen oder technologische Entwicklung, wir liefern Ihnen fundierte Einordnungen, zeigen spannende Köpfe auf und erklären die Zusammenhänge. Mit einem Probeabo bekommen Sie vollen Zugriff auf alle digitalen Inhalte, im Test 4 Wochen lang für nur 1 Euro. Mehr Infos unter handelsblatt.com/mehrwirtschaft. Und damit geht es jetzt direkt zu meinem Gespräch mit Thies Boukema, Head of Data, Tech and AI bei Dawn Capital. Hi Thies, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
Thies, today we want to talk about how people can reach their professional goals through building the right connections. We want to talk about the role of data and AI in this and about how you turned all of this into a software at venture capital firm Dawn Capital. There is only one rule on this podcast. Our goal is that experts still learn something, but in words everyone can understand. So if you use a term that people from other industries might not know, please explain it briefly, okay?
Perfect.
And just to be safe, I have this small buzzer here. If you hear it, it means you should quickly explain what the term means. Does that work for you?
Yes, it does. I think venture capitalists love using jargon, so I think this is something I'm going to just bring to the office anyways.
Yeah, great. Okay, let's try. So is there a word you want to explain right away because friends often look confused when you use it?
I think the term LP or limited partner is something that is useful to explain. So
that is a great word. So what does it mean?
Perfect. So a venture capital firm, we get a bunch of money from LPs. These can be rich people. These can be family offices or institutional investors like pension funds. And then we try to invest them in fantastic early stage software companies so that hopefully in 5, 7, 8 years, we can give back 3-4 times the money that we originally received from our LPs. So the LPs, you can think sort of the clients that have given money to Dawn, so for us to invest in startups.
Yeah, and you mentioned early stage. What does that actually mean?
That's also a good point. So early stage has different meanings, I think, especially in today's time with AI. When I say early, I mean we typically invest in companies, and we make some exceptions, but companies that do about 1 million to 15 million in revenue at the time. And then we hope to help them and scale them into very big businesses.
Nach einer kurzen Unterbrechung geht es gleich weiter. Bleiben Sie dran.
Hast du jemals deine HR- oder Payroll-Software geliebt? Wahrscheinlich nicht. Die meisten Plattformen sind langsam und umständlich. Deal ändert das. Eine globale KI-Native-Lösung für HR, IT und Payroll. Einstellen, bezahlen und managen. Alles zentral an einem Ort. KI-Agenten übernehmen Compliance, Onboarding und Payroll. Und über 2000 ExpertInnen in 130 Ländern sorgen dafür, dass du überall abgesichert bist. Jetzt Demo buchen auf deel.com/podcast.
And say a few words about Dawn Capital. So how much money do you manage and how much do you invest in young companies?
So we are a business-to-business software investor. So you can think of software like Spotify has me and you as a customer. So they're business to consumer. We invest in companies that would sell software to Spotify. We have about $2 billion under management. We're on Fund 5 at the moment. And we've invested in 13 companies that currently have a valuation of $1 billion or more.
Great. And one interesting thing is that at Dawn, you are not responsible for investments, but for data and AI. And we will come back to that in a moment. First, I would like to introduce you to our listeners, and I want to do it in the way I got to know you. One of the first things you told me was that for the first 20 years of your life, you thought you would die young. Why was that?
So there was small talk, so I like it. I was born with a brain condition called hydrocephalus, which means you have too much water around your brain. So everyone's brain is sort of floating around in water. If you have too much water in your skull, you're going to get pressure. And my pressure was really, really severe as a kid. So I've been kept, basically the best way how I can describe how you felt is the day I felt after Wiesn or after Oktoberfest. So like being properly pretty, feeling very hungover, but then feeling like that all the time from when I was born roughly to the age of 20. And then 3-4 times a week on average, sometimes more, sometimes less, I would get these migraine attacks. But because the root cause is slightly different, they would just last very long. So I would wake up someday and like my left or my right eye was not working or barely working. I wouldn't have feelings in my arms, or I wouldn't have feelings in my fingers, or my legs just don't work very properly, or I couldn't even control my bladder sometimes. I hope no one's having breakfast. I felt awful all the time. And then 3-4 times a week, it would be bad enough for me to go to the hospital. I've been kept overnight in a hospital for monitoring 280 times in my life.
280 times. So
I was really in and out of hospitals. My parents used to give me a teddy bear every time I'd be kept overnight. And at some point when I was 13, I had, like 90 teddy bears. And I told my parents, there's no space. The house isn't so big. We need to stop with the teddy bears.
What did you do with all the bears? Do you still have them?
We donated them. There's like this, it's getting a little emotional. There's like a support group or sort of donation fund for kids that are chronically ill at the hospital. So we donate them.
So maybe they collect them now.
Maybe, yeah. And hopefully they get, some support out of it. But basically I grew up very, very, very sick and also expecting to die quite young. Because I expected that, when the pressure's so bad that your eyes stop working or your legs stop working, there's a very high chance of internal bleeding. And you also don't know if something has been permanently damaged. And I think that's one thing that was tough to deal with as a kid. I think it was much tougher as a kid than I am now. But if you wake up and your left eye is not working, there was a real risk that that's it, that it's not coming back. And that's, of course, very scary. So I had this my entire life. I always expected that at some point in my early 20s, I would deteriorate very quickly or die young. That was the medical advice. And then I did this internship in the US, and this American doctor looks at me, and he basically goes,
Wait a moment. You were born and raised in the Netherlands, right?
Yes, correct, for the first 20 years.
So you were medicated there and stayed at the hospital there. And then your life took a completely unexpected turn. That was in New York.
Yes. So long story short, someone took a pity on me and helped me get an internship in New York. And when I was there, I sort of repaid that kindness by I think it's week 3 of the internship, just collapsing at my desk in front of everyone and vomiting everywhere. And it was quite dramatic. And I was trying to explain that this is normal and this is fine and they shouldn't bring me to the hospital.
Sure.
As a European person, I was really scared of American hospital bills. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to bankrupt my parents. It's going to be a disaster. So I'm really trying to argue that I'm fine, but keep in mind, I vomited everywhere. My eyes don't work. My legs don't work. So I can't walk to the bathroom. I'm like, just grab me by my armpits and just sort of drag me. And then there's this bossy secretary who's like, this is ridiculous. You're going to the hospital. Mm-hmm. And thankfully she did this because this American doctor said, look, our interpretation of your medical images, of your scans, is just different than the European interpretation at the time. Because I've been, if you're that sick, every school trip I've ever done, I've always ended up in the hospital. If I had a school trip to Lille, I see the hospital in Lille. If I went to the hospital in Paris, I remember at some point going on a school trip to Versailles and having to get basically helicoptered out because the car couldn't get there. And just this Japanese tourist being like really in my face with his long hair. Anyways, I've seen like many hostels in Europe. And just the interpretation in the US was different. So I have brain surgery there. I wake up, I basically call my parents, explain to them, I think, how bad it's been in my youth. Because, when I think if I would have a headache like that today, I would 100% inform my partner or I would call someone because you would do something. But
you were just used by that at the time.
Exactly. And also every time that my parents would see me so sick. Like it's really hard to do. I broke my hand mountain biking when I was 23. So after, there's obviously a happy ending to the story. I broke my hand in 7 places and I still kept mountain biking for 4 hours. I really have a pretty high pain tolerance. I have some nerve damage as well from this. The pain was really, it's indescribably bad. Like really just all light, all joy in this world just disappear. So when my parents, and are very loving parents, when they would see me like that, they would obviously just, it freaks them out, right? And I think it'll still freak them out after 100 times. So rather than making me worried all the time, I'd sometimes, I tried to downplay it as much as I could. So if I would like cycle home from school, because I'm Dutch, so of course I would cycle home from school. I'd cycle home from school, and then I'd get this horrible migraine attack, and I'd just lie in a ditch somewhere for a couple of hours. And then I'd be like late for dinner. I would just make up some excuse. I'm like, well, sorry, I was playing with my friends and I lost track of time. And then a couple of times I like got grounded. They're like, you're so irresponsible. You don't even text us. And I'm like, my thumb isn't working. How am I supposed to? Anyways, and I would just sort of take it on the chin because I have very loving parents.
So what happened there at the hospital?
So I had a new pump installed. Like imagine, I don't know, you have it's not very good. As an engineer, I should really do better. There's too much pressure in the brain, so they basically just stick in a pump that gets rid of the excess fluid. As if everyone's brain has like a little entrance hole and an exit hole. They just put in a second exit hole effectively with a pump. And this pump gets rid of the excess fluid. So if pressure goes up, it pumps a bit more. If pressure goes down, it pumps a bit less. And this helps stabilize the pressure. It's quite a big surgery because also that has to go into your stomach. So it's like 230-ish stitches. It's quite a lot. I remember waking up, and admittedly, I still had a bit of morphine in my system. I remember waking up in the pediatric wing, like the children's wing of the hospital, because I was only 20. And my legs didn't fit on the bed because I'm Dutch. And I was like, man, I feel better than I can remember because at least my head didn't. I guess I wasn't conscious that I always felt like my head was getting crushed because I don't know any better. It's a little bit like, I don't know if this will give away how old I am, but when I was growing up, some of these TVs used to have this like black and white static through it. And like the image is a little fuzzy. There's like sort of this snow almost that goes through the image. And the only way to sort of fix it, give it a good whack. But because I always had pressure also on all my nerves, I always saw a little bit of static, but I didn't have a frame of reference. It's not like I used to see well. And so I remember just waking up and like everything was in HD. My head felt light. I wasn't going to die early anymore. So I was like, man, I can do anything. This is like a Walt Disney movie. I think this is also why I picked up a little bit of an American accent, just because for all of its flaws, the US is kind of where my life started in many ways. So I always have a soft spot no matter what I read in the news. But yeah, that's been a very, very pivotal moment in my life.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to talk to you about all this in the podcast is that the doctor who realized that your brain condition was actually operable did not only change your life, he also changed how you look at medicine and at medical data. How exactly did that change your perspective?
So I think there's two... I think one of the big ones that you get with a lot of ambitious young people is that they're like, I'm totally willing to take on this job or this industry that's going to be brutal, where the hours are awful, for some kind of big payoff in the future. Like a lot of people say that join McKinsey, they know that it's a very intense place to work, but it's sort of like this big marshmallow test where they're like, I'm really intense and I can handle it for 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it is, because then the job I can get after 5 years of McKinsey or after Goldman Sachs will be totally worth it. And I had my brain surgery. I then did 2 banking internships because I dress this way and I'm preppy and I have a haircut and I wear too much hair gel. And people around me were like, man, if you're good with numbers and, you know, by comparison, right, doing PowerPoint slides at 2 a.m. really isn't that bad. I didn't love it. That I went to the London School of Economics for a master's where everyone dreams of working at McKinsey or Goldman. And I think I had 2 pieces that moved me towards tech. The first one is that I knew that people in tech, especially Google, but also a lot of these, like Microsoft as a health division, that they were building data and AI systems that would help diagnose medical diseases better. So they would diagnose breast cancer scans or eye scans. And I was like, man, how amazing would it be to work on that and get paid a Google engineering salary, right? Like, and both have the whole moral high ground to all my friends in finance, and I can live next door. I mean, just living the dream. And I think the second one is that seemed like the type of work I wanted to do today. Whereas for some of these other careers, I just thought, I'm also, it just seemed really, really exciting to learn the tech side early on so that I could down the line contribute to one of those teams.
Yeah, I think that people listening to you would wonder at this time of the podcast, how did you manage to be such a good student that you had those opportunities? So with all the illness you had and the serious brain condition and feeling totally hungover all the time.
So like a normal school week for me was not 5 days. Like it'd be very rare that I'd be at school 5 days a week. Almost always at least 1, 2, 3 days a week I'd finish something. I think one thing that helped massively is my dad is a very intellectual man. He has 2 bachelor's degrees, 2 master's degrees, and did his PhD in record time. And he, even though he's been retired now for a while, he still writes academic articles in English, in Dutch, and in German. He's not native in German. He's written something in Italian, I think. Like, he's just a very intellectual person, so that helped. I think secondly, there's been healthy pressure throughout where it's kind of like, you should do your best. But also, if you do your best, surely you'll end up pretty well. And that it might sound like it wasn't healthy, but I think that was extremely healthy. And then also, my dad is just a very, very serious person. And he isn't someone that I think always enjoyed work that much. And it was inspiring for me as a kid, seeing my dad, go down to the study on a Saturday morning at 6 a.m., clearly not excited to do this. And he would just work. Like, he wouldn't do other stuff. He wouldn't procrastinate. He wouldn't read the newspaper. He wouldn't be on his phone browsing TikTok. I mean, it's also because my dad's 74. But I think I definitely get piece of my work ethic, I think, from my dad, and my intellectual focus from my dad. But it was quite tough. I think one of the things that helped me a lot is I was so scared of falling behind that, for example, on the first day of school, post-holidays, I would go to all my teachers and say, look, sometimes I'm just in and out of hostels for 2 weeks at a time. I need to build up a buffer when I can. So can you give me the reading list, the exam dates, and all that kind of stuff so that when I can give 100%, or at least my version of 100%, that I can get started? And because I can never do an all-nighter. I can't do this last-minute sprint. I can't play video games until 4 p.m. and you'd be like, fuck it. Now, because maybe by that time, I've had another migraine attack, and that's me for the next 48 hours. So I was very serious as a kid. I started working. I was very good, I think, at starting without an impending deadline. Mm-hmm. And even then, when I got healthy and I did my master's, I finished my master's thesis 7 months before the deadline, which also made me deeply unpopular in my year, because like the dean came in and said, like, I don't want to hear anything about printers. I don't want to hear about your grandmother passing away. I don't want to hear your dog. And you're like,
And are you still the same?
I'd say so. I think I'm still pretty intense, I think, in that regard. I think I also have to be in my job because, well, we can go into that later. But, if you're an investor at the firm, there's a very clear precedent for how you could make VP, principal, partner, general partner. Sorry. Thank you. So sorry,
explains all these terms. So this is the hierarchy, basically, in the venture firm, yes?
Yes, correct. So basically, if you are an investor, there's just a very clear path for you to get promoted, right? You need to do great deals. And if you do fantastic deals and you do the analysis, but there's lots of other people that have done similar work before. There's a very clear standard of what excellence looks like. And especially with deals, if you do a deal that becomes, when you invest in a company when it's worth $100 million, and then it becomes worth $20 billion, you've done something right and made a lot of money for the firm. For me, because I built the internal technology, there isn't anyone else that did my job before at Dawn. There's almost no one in the industry, really, that does my type of job. And then our angle, which is on relationship intelligence, is also different, I think, than almost all the other firms in the space. So I really have to, I have to be massively, I think, intrinsically motivated and think myself, what should I be doing at any given point? What is valuable for me to do from a tech perspective, from another perspective? Like, I definitely thrive on having basically just a blank sheet of paper where every 6 months I have to tell people what I've done for the last 6 months.
Yeah, and we talk about this in a minute. So your big goal was originally to join a health-focused team at Google.
Yes.
And you ended up doing this, but what you also did is joining a reporting team, isn't that right, at Google?
Yes.
And there you learned a lot about financial data and how to do reporting. So tell us a little bit about this step and how you then ended up in venture.
Yes. So I did my 2 banking internships where I learned loads. But one thing that I just found so tedious is how much manual copy and pasting of certain numbers I had to do. So like there was a number that was on this slide, and now I had to manually copy it over to that slide. And then someone was like, that number isn't quite right anymore. There's a lot of manual stuff that had to be done there. I joined Google in ad sales, but my big vision again was to move into one of the healthcare teams and into one of these AI roles. I did a stats degree and a law degree in undergrad because my dad was a lawyer, his dad was a lawyer, so I could do anything I wanted as long as it was law. And I made a real commitment to just do as many extra projects next to my core job at Google with more analytical and data-heavy teams. At some point, I managed to get a rotation with Google Health, or DeepMind Health, they fused, on what's called diabetic retinopathy, which is a type of eye disease that causes blindness. Mm-hmm. And I think because I've been so sick myself in a way that if someone would have just diagnosed some of those scans better, that I would have had 20 years of my life back. So to me, this problem is very tangible. And I should probably not be too Dutch about this, but the speed that at Google Health, they have excellent research teams that develop algorithms that do some of these diagnoses better than the best doctors in the world. But I found them too conservative, for me anyways, about rolling this technology out. I'm like, if you can get an algorithm that works better than the best ophthalmologists at Harvard, surely you just roll this out in the US, right? Surely then you get a sales force and you just go hospital to hospital to hospital. And obviously you need to be respectful, right? You're dealing with people's lives, you're dealing with people's health. But at the same time, I think you can also be too conservative, because if you have a magic cure or something that's 10 percentage points better than what a doctor can do now, and you can do this better, faster, cheaper at a bigger scale, there's to me also like this urgency to roll this out. And Google is a big beast. Health data at Google is very sensitive because the second any journalist, for example, from Handelsblatt, the headline kind of writes itself, right? Especially when you do like breast cancer scans. It's like, is Google going to use your wife's breast cancer scans to sell you ads? That headline is terrifying. So they're very risk averse, which is, I think, part of why some of the people that have left Google Health to start their own thing, where they could say, look, I used to, work with some smart people, but now I don't have this regulatory or this PR risk that I have to mitigate. I think I've done extremely well.
Right. And then you joined another team.
Yes. So
because
then
you basically were not patient enough to stay at the health team.
Yeah. My big dream for, at that point, like 6 years, and the reason why in my evenings I did data engineering projects and whatever, is not because actually I found data engineering that fascinating. I was like, it's a tool to get into that team. So when that team wasn't everything I hoped it would be, an old mentor of mine said, look, there's this acquisition in Google called, it's called GMP. It's Google. It's basically our enterprise ad solution. So if you're a very big company, you want to buy some Google ads, you want to buy Snapchat, you want to buy connected TV, you want to buy all types of ads. The special enterprise section at Google, and the core reporting and processes there for how sales bonuses are paid out and how reporting is done and how the slides are updated is done very traditionally. It's very Excel heavy. And in the regular Google Ads system, it's all of finance is basically an engineering problem. So there's unbelievable data pipelines, all the slides auto update, like it's amazing. And he said, look, there's this team that's painful, morale's low, processes are manual. It's very stressful because obviously you get paid sales bonuses wrong. People are very angry. But I'd love for someone to actually just fix all the plumbing there. So I did that for two and a half years, where I learned a lot. And then I was at a dinner with a bunch of private equity, venture capital friends, and some of them had to leave early to do their quarterly reporting slides. And I had like, my mind was just blown. I'm like, especially for some of these PE firms, I'm like, you guys have so much money. There's so many people. You pay your people so much per hour effectively. You can just automate this so heavily. And if you don't even do this, I guarantee you there's like 50 other things you should be doing that will help you invest better, run better, operate better, and just make daily working life nicer for everyone involved.
Yeah, and it's really kind of funny. So many investors believe that their own business cannot really be transformed by AI.
Yes.
Because it relies on gut feeling and personal relationships and so forth.
Yes.
How do venture capital investors usually approach an investment today? Can you walk us through the classic process?
Yes. So the classic process, and I'll go sort of for the modern classic process. The modern classic process is either a founder, the founder of a company. Again, I hear the squeaky noise when I use too much jargon. Either the founder contacts us or we contact the founder. We've heard about them. We've got an introduction. Some people use some off-the-shelf tooling like Synaptic or Harmonic or other things to sort of give an alert when there's a new company that like we only do business-to-business software companies based in Europe. So if there's something that fits some of those criteria, it'll get surfaced. We then have a chat. This is a little bit like dating, honestly, where we are trying to make sure that they really like us and they are trying to make sure that we really like them. And just like dating, sometimes you have people that play hard to get. But basically, ideally, both sides like each other. If we get excited and we think the founding team is excellent, we think that the problem they're solving is also a big enough problem, right? Because if it's a great founder, but they're starting a local flower store, that might not be big enough. But if they're saying we are going to build better software for every bank on the planet, that could be a very, very big business. If we get convinced that the founding team is the right people, that this is a company in a space that we believe could be a massive business, then we would write what's called a term sheet, effectively. And the term sheet will have, we want blah shares of your company. We want like 10% of your company at a certain price. There's a bunch of other legal stuff underneath. No disrespect to the lawyers listening. Then there's a bit of negotiation. And then ideally they sign with us and we get 10% of the business for, $20 million or something. Where the relationship bit hugely comes in is it's extremely useful to get a reference on the founding team. Mm-hmm. So let's say there's a co-founder called Larissa. Having someone that's worked with you before, or having people that have invested in you at an earlier stage, or people that are an angel investor or an advisor into your company.
An angel
investor is a rich, yes. An angel investor it's a very flattering term. It's basically a rich individual that has given some of their own money.
Yeah.
So rather than Dawn as a fund, it will be one day, maybe when I'm rich, I could just say, here's $50,000 from my own bank account. And the relationship that comes in where, in order to know, is this founder exciting? And is this someone I have to meet? It is hugely valuable to have someone that we trust say, clear your calendar, you have to meet Larissa. This is just super, super useful, because often this is just the best signal. What also helps is when we put in a term sheet, this sort of preliminary contract, right? Where we say, look, we value your company at $200 million and we want 10% for, 20. With an understanding what's important to you in the structuring. So when we give you an offer, you go, this is really the type of offer that I want. The only real way to do this, ideally, is to have insiders, right? To have someone that you trust, or someone that's invested in you before, someone you work with already, give us that scoop. And then in terms of winning you over, because for the best founders, often we're not the only fund that, wants to invest in you. For the most successful founders, there's just a line of VCs out of the door begging to give you money.
Right. And this dinner, this dinner you mentioned became your entry point into the industry, and you basically automated this process, did you, at Dawn?
Yeah. So basically, when we my pitch was, and I interviewed with a bunch of American funds, PE funds, VC funds. I had a very good click at Dawn from the beginning. There's one of the co-founders, this guy called Norman. Norman is someone that just oozes charisma. And when you meet Norman, it's very hard not to want to work for Norman. My pitch was, the way you currently do reporting is super manual and it breaks all the time. This means you don't actually know how companies are doing, and there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff afterwards. And Norman said, look, I know that you're on probation for the next 3 months. I know you're leaving your job at Google to do this. You seem very confident you can make a dent in this problem. Go for it. Whereas some of the other funds I spoke with were like, well, which other fund is doing this? And I'd be like, well, every big tech company does it this way, because I live with a guy from Amazon and I live with a guy from Salesforce, and potentially share more, discuss more ideas than maybe we should have. But all the big tech companies do reporting very similarly, and all the finance firms do it in their own way. And it's very manual with all the finance firms. So I was like, we can make a massive dent in this. And I started yapping and I forgot the rest of your question. Sorry.
Yeah, I just asked you about the system you built at Dawn. So you automated the whole process, how to very strategically meet specific people through connections and win them over, isn't it?
Yes. So the first bit I did, maybe the first 3 months, is make sure that our internal reporting is very, very smooth. So when we get data from a portfolio company, that we use some AI to actually check, does that submission make any sense? Did they accidentally add 2 somewhere? Are they missing a bunch of stuff? Just make that very smooth. And then go from that source system to making sure that this automatically updates all the slides, sheets, this kind of stuff. This is not very exciting to me, but this saves a huge amount of time, because they're no longer chasing 2 different partners. Hey, I see this number here and I see that number there. It's just one source of truth, and it all flows through. The most exciting and thing I've worked on, and now the focus of the fund. Let me just take one step back. I thought, like at hedge funds, all the smart people are trying to help pick stocks. We're trying to figure out which stock should we buy or sell. And this is effectively called sourcing. So, like, how do you find the next, massive founder? In Germany, I guess, how do you find the next Personio, for example? How do you find Personio when they're still a tiny, teeny little company, so you can get a big ownership stake for cheap? And I thought this is what I would be doing once I fixed reporting. And when I was maybe 3-4 months into the role, there was this payments deal in the Nordics. And we've been trying to get in touch for a couple of months at that point. And by the time that we finally get a meeting with the founder, we're a very research-heavy fund. So one way that we win over founders is, we speak with experts, we have consulting networks. We really spend a lot of time and money to come across smarts and to give some insights that the founder doesn't know. So hopefully they go, wow, if this person will be on my board, they would help me see things that I otherwise wouldn't. And the founding meeting goes really well. But the founder goes, hey, I took money from one of your competitors 2 weeks ago. So we missed, that ship had sailed. And I hear Norman on the board the next day mention this to some other people that he sits on the board with. And 2 people on the board afterwards reach out to him and say, but what, me and Anna, we're angel investors, right? We've given our own money at that founder because we used to work with the person. They're unbelievable. Like they're going to build a huge business, and they have. Why don't you just ask for an introduction, Norman? Because we love you. We love Dawn. You would have been a great fit. So Norman goes back to the deal team because Norman wasn't involved in that specific deal. And he goes, why didn't you ask me, to ask for this favor? Like we have this unbelievable way into the company that maybe none of our competitors have. Why didn't you ask me? And the deal team's like, Norman, how am I supposed to know that you sit on a board with someone who is an investor in a company that we are looking at? And then I'm thinking, but we have all the data, right? This is just sort of a graph where if I would build something that for every meeting that everyone has tells you what to ask about, if they're connected some way to a relevant deal that you would ask. If I build a graph that also helps us just ask how to get to certain partners. So let's say there's a cool company on flat pay. Give me 10 paths to flat pay. And it'll say, well, Josh has met Sander, the CEO, 5 times. But actually, Norman sits on a board with someone who has invested in Sander's previous company. And 3 of our previous, like a CTO at one of our companies, has since moved over to flat pay. So actually so that you just can leverage networks and relationships 100 times better than you could otherwise. And that became the big focus instead of just trying to use data to source and take the humans out of the loop. Like we've really leaned into relationships.
Yeah, I think for my own job in journalism, a system like this would be incredibly useful. So often the question is, who has a certain piece of information and how do I build enough trust so they share it with me? And I think this is also relevant for sales, hiring, or event teams. So explain to us, how does it work? How does the system look like today? What did you build then?
So there's 3 main products in Rolex. I'll give you how it currently works in VC, and then please help me poke and prod a little bit to make it more, less VC specific and more relevant for the rest of the network. So I think the first thing that we did is we have about 12 investment professionals, and we want to be extremely disciplined and smart about who are we networking with. So we do this analysis. Part of Rolex helps us to analyze all the different people in the European and American ecosystem that are relevant and to identify which relationships we aren't close with, but we should be close with. So that also helps when we have a new joiner, who should they start networking with? For a certain fund, if there's 3 different senior partners at that fund, if all 3 of them are relevant, we need to make sure that our senior people also make sure that they have contact with those senior people.
So this is not about certain deals, but about all the potential deals that can happen in the future.
Exactly. Where the thesis is, if, we invest in companies typically when they do about $1 million in revenue and up, there's a whole ecosystem of people that invest earlier than us. The best way how we can see the best possible deals earlier is if we can make sure that from that earlier layer, we are super, super good at keeping the right people close. And this also means which angel investors in Estonia, which key funds in Spain, which key people at those key funds in Spain. This helps us just be very, very disciplined and as a fund. And then also we work with our events teams. We're like, man, there's actually a bunch of these angels in Germany that we don't have a relationship with. How do we, and that's where the art comes in. But the starting point is having that data and having that visibility. So that helps us understand who should we be close with. The second piece is when we have a meeting. So this is also when or when there's a conference, who are the relevant people attending and what should you talk about? This helped me hopefully come across less stupid when I reach out to you for Bits and Pretzels, because you get more like surface if you're going to Bits and Pretzels.
And this is how we met.
This is how we met. Exactly. So rather than just going to a conference and then posting on LinkedIn, hey, I'm going to this conference, who should I meet? Which I think is a super stupid way to do things. You can scan the guest list, or we have some stuff there, and then figure out who are the most relevant people and why. And then if I see someone relevant, like you're a senior journalist at Handelsblatt, what should I know about you so I can build that trust, so you can tell that I've done my homework? And we have a different agent for journalists, a different agent for LPs, the people that have given us money, a different agent for founders, and a different agent for investors, which just helps us have better conversations when we are in front of that person.
And those are human agents or AI agents?
They're very much AI agents. Otherwise, I would be... we have a 3-person engineering team, so I wouldn't have the capacity to just type away at the corner. And then the third pillar is, okay, if I want to get to a certain person, like let's say we start a fundraise again, we know that there's an interesting pension fund or something. Who would we know that could give us an introduction to that person? Or if there's an interesting founder, who do we know that could either give us an introduction, or even after we've had the meeting, who are all the people that actually we could ask for a favor if we get excited about the founder, to just casually drop them a line and be like, hey, I don't know if you're fundraising, but if you are fundraising, I really love Dawn. Mm-hmm. Or all the people that have worked at but this happens more and more, people that have worked at one of a company we've invested in that now work at that company. So we can ask the CTO or the CEO or the founder of our portfolio company to just reach out and be like, hey, FYI, I know you now are head of data at this company. Just really wanted to say how much I appreciated Dawn, and they were fantastic. And like, I think because we also have been kind even to companies that haven't done that well, we have a lot of favors to pull there.
Mm-hmm. And I can imagine that not everyone feels comfortable when they realize that they were approached in such a strategic way. So have you ever seen negative reactions, and how do you personally think about this?
So I've thought about how I would handle it. I haven't actually had to do it much, because I think the main thing that people realize is when we have a meeting, we have maybe more of an agenda than some other funds or some other people might have, but we're also much more specific and prepared as a result. So if I reach out to a cool journalist at Handelsblatt, I will have written and I'll have seen your most relevant articles that you've written, which surely is flattering. So also I can ask for more pointed things. So I also know that meeting is going to be more relevant, and I've already thought about what can I offer you in return. And when we meet an investor, rather than being like, have you done anything interesting? And they say, well, we did this robotics deal in San Francisco, but we only invest in Europe and we just do software, so that's not useful. We can just be much more pointed. And also we have the information about their companies at our fingertips. We can say, hey, there's this, what was it? Like 6 months ago, I had lunch with Joël from Begin Capital. It's a Dutch VC firm. Begin Capital was surfaced by Rolex as a fund we should get to know. Joël was flagged as the person that's like the rising star at the fund that we should get to know. I build a relationship with Joël. I have a meeting with Joël. At the very top, it just says, if you're going to ask about one thing, it should be about Runware. This is the context about Runware, why it's hugely exciting. So I'm able to go to Runware and be like, so this firm has like pivoted a couple of times. The founders have built businesses in the past. They just got these media pieces. They attended one of the Dawn events, and the revenue traction seems to be unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Is that true? And then Joël goes, that's amazing. How do you know this? Yeah, actually, revenue's gone up. They've tripled in revenue in the last 2 months. And, thank you for looking at the portfolio of stuff we've invested in, because nothing is worse than you taking the time to meet a person and they've clearly done zero prep before the call.
Yeah, and I remember being a bit surprised and also flattered when we met, and I realized that I was part of your own strategic process and of building a network. So I know how hard it is to prepare and follow up on such big events in a way that really makes them useful. I mean, for me and for many people in my network. So do you have any tips for that, for us being without such an amazing system?
So I think the lowest tech solution, and even at Google, we had some things for the sales team. But I think that what has been extremely useful for us is just making a list of who are the key stakeholders. And we now do this across various departments. So also in our comms team, in our investor relations function, in our investment team, we're doing the exercise. My advice if I join Mercedes-Benz would be, if you have suppliers, if you have clients, whatever your key stakeholder is, make a real list of who are the most important people. Make sure that your events team also and marketing team is working with, actually, if you do an event, that, that those people are invited, and maybe even think about where you should be doing an event. So like our target list of people also now influences where we host dinners. Mm-hmm. So we will do a dinner in Estonia because we're like, man, there's actually super relevant people in Estonia and we don't know them. So we, our events throughout, it's a bit of a flywheel. And then for some of these key people, like let's say there's an early stage fund, like, I don't know, Concept Ventures, or let me take Concept Ventures as an example. If it's a really, really relevant fund for us, that we're very disciplined and have the data at our fingertips, like when did we last have one-on-one meetings with the relevant people? Who are the relevant people at the organization? Who at Dawn has a good relationship with those people? Mm-hmm. Which of those people do we need to get closer with? Assign them to someone. So it's no longer, I'll take care of it. It's like, if you haven't had meetings in a month or in 3 months, someone's going to get yelled at in the nicest possible way. And then for some of the really relevant funds, that there's both junior people to junior people and senior people to senior people relationships.
Right.
So that you can be much more tactical. And then the final one is, and this happened a lot at Google, you would have, say, I don't know, IKEA was a big client. You would have one person that was friends with all 12 people that mattered at IKEA. This is a huge risk, because if that person decides, hey, thanks, but I'm moving to Meta or I'm moving to TikTok, we now have no good relationships with IKEA, and that entire account is at risk. So for the really important stakeholders, it's worth mapping if you have a good relationship because Thies has a good relationship, or ideally you also bring in Larissa proactively so that you have some depth.
Interesting. So Thies, I think we've learned a lot today, and many people can apply that directly. Thank you for the tips, for the openness with which you talked about your illness, and for this very enjoyable conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Larissa.
Und das, liebe Zuhörerinnen und Zuhörer, war es auch schon wieder mit Handelsblatt Disrupt. Wir freuen uns jederzeit über Ihr Feedback per E-Mail oder auf LinkedIn. Alle Infos finden Sie in den Shownotes. Ich sage Tschüss und bis hoffentlich nächste Woche. Redaktion Larissa Holzki, Produktion Migo Fecke.